just bear with me for a moment. Y'all know how I like to make sure everything's running right. Yep. Well, I suppose it's kind of weird not seeing me in front of my fence or on my couch like I usually am. But today, I thought I'd do some just chatting. And as you can see, I have some paper here in front of me. Yep, because this is the story as to why Dan America cosplays Hank Hill from King of the Hill. Tell you what. So, without further ado, Behind the Propane Man, Part 1. I first started imitating Mike Judd's characters toward the end of 1993. I was 12 years old, in 7th grade, and struggling with the social anxiety and low self-esteem. I wanted to be funny, but I was awkward, overweight, and lacked self-confidence. Boy, you'd think I could say that one without stuttering or losing my tongue. Yep. Anyway, I knew little about the world beyond my suburban neighborhood and elementary school. For the first half of the 7th grade, I was bullied, lived in fear, convinced that everyone in middle school hated me. I was even kicked in the face during a fight. Have you ever been kicked in the face? It hurts. I was one of those kids who carefully mapped out their routes through the school hallways to avoid bullies, clinging to my small group of friends while constantly worrying they would abandon me. Then I discovered Beavis and Butthead. To me, they were just like someone who laughed at everything around them, regardless of whether the world laughed with them or the world laughed without them. They found humor in everything, and at the time, everyone loved them. They could not get enough of them, and I was one of them. I wanted to be like them. I started imitating their voices and laughter, absorbing their personalities. Mike Judge's humor felt like my humor, and it all made sense to me. Imitating them boosted my self-esteem. I did not imitate their actions, just their voices and comedic style. I started performing my impressions for friends at school, and people laughed. That laughter helped restore my confidence, so I kept doing it. At home, at school, everywhere. My Beavis and Butthead impression became my way of expressing myself. And I practiced it so much that I rarely used my real voice. During a school field trip to see a play, a classmate turned to me, and I was doing my impression, and he did not seem impressed. Instead, he laid into me. I will always remember what he said. He said that I sounded nothing like Beavis and Butthead, and that I was stupid for trying to sound like them, and that it was pathetic that I continued to try and sound like them, because I thought that it would make people like me. He told me to stop doing it because I was only making a fool of myself. But I could not. My impression was my comfort zone, so I kept going until I met someone who became my lifelong friend, Mike. Mike was one of those cool kids, and I was a dork. Through my constant efforts of trying to be funny, I caught his attention, and he wanted to be my friend. Being a dork and a misfit, I wanted Mike to like me, so whenever I saw him, I tried to be funny. Our friendship eventually progressed to the exchange of phone numbers, which was a bigger deal back in the 1990s than it is in modern day times, because it meant that someone really wanted to communicate with you. We spent hours talking on the phone, and I would only use my Beavis and Butthead voices for 4 months. I often wonder if he never called me out on it because he genuinely enjoyed it, or if he was just curious to see how long I would keep it up. Eventually, I stopped imitating Beavis and Butthead constantly, and it was primarily because of Mike's influence. Mike and I are still friends to this day. When King of the Hill premiered in 1997, I was 16 and a junior in high school. My Beavis and Butthead obsession had faded, but I still admired Mike Judge's work. At first, I watched King of the Hill with skepticism, but over time it grew on me. In the early 2000s, when DVDs were at their peak, I rediscovered King of the Hill and became obsessed. I owned seasons 1 through 7 and watched them repeatedly. Eventually, I started imitating Hank Hill, and to my surprise, it just came naturally to me. When King of the Hill became available on Netflix, my addiction intensified. I could not eat or sleep without watching King of the Hill. When Netflix removed the series, I started DVRing episodes from Adult Swim. I called it my stash. Then my wife gifted me the entire series on Apple TV, allowing me to stream my own playlist of King of the Hill. For over 25 years, I have watched King of the Hill daily. I don't consider myself an expert or a dedicated fan. I'm just someone who grew up on Mike Judge and just happened to look like Hank Hill, and I can sound like him. I never did anything with my ability to channel Mike Judge's characters before. I only did the voices for family and friends. I don't consider myself an expert on King of the Hill, and I'm not some crazy person who thinks that Mike Judge's mind is my own. I acknowledge that and excuse me. I acknowledge that. But I do still appreciate Mike Judge's sense of humor. His sense of humor was such a major influence on me that it helped shape mine. I had never intended on doing anything with my impression. I just considered it to be a useless knowledge and a useless talent. I had always wanted to be a comedian, an actor, and my dad had always supported me. I won an award in high school for a comedic student film I made, and later went to community college for journalism and acting, but I dropped out years later. Then I enrolled in some kind of a vocational school for local radio and television. It did not offer legitimate credentials unless I paid for them, but I still stuck with it, and I made it turn into a career when I got a job at a radio station. It was a long shot, but I turned that shot into a 6-year career as a soundboard operator, a producer, YouTuber, blogger, podcaster, and even a mascot for special events. At the same time, I performed stand-up comedy at open mics and acted in local film productions. But nothing ever truly worked out for me. I never found success by any official standards. On April 15th in 2020, I was let go from the radio station I worked at. They said it was because of budget cuts during COVID, but it was actually kind of that I got replaced by AI. I hadn't given up on my dreams, though, but they did fade a bit. I stayed off social media for 3 years. I was in a short film, but I felt out of place because without working for the radio station, it made me feel like a fraud because I was no longer in media production, and that was how everyone knew me. During those 3 years, I felt hopeless. I was a shell of who I used to be, hiding from the reality of who I had become, because it made me feel like I had failed myself. Yep, excuse me. I was not who my 12-year-old self would want me to be. I would constantly ask myself, what was it all worth? Was this what it was all leading up to? Because it felt like nothing. On September 16th, 2023, everything changed. Are you going to cut that out? Dang it. Well, that is an obstacle that you run into when you want to go live outside in the summertime. Anyway, on with the story. Dang bird. On September 16th, 2023, everything changed. The local Halloween stores opened for the season, and it gave me an idea. I wanted to find a cheap pair of fake glasses and dressed up like Hank Hill. And then I was going to make a video of myself cosplaying Hank Hill, just to see how people would react. I went to the Halloween store and took my 11-year-old son, who also loves Halloween, and I found me a pair of fake glasses that looked close enough for $7.99. That night I wrote the first 2 episodes of Propane Man Confidential. I did not want to just quote King of the Hill. I wanted to cosplay as Hank Hill, reacting to modern-day culture. Hank reminded me of my father and my grandfather, and in some ways I wish I could be Hank Hill. I did not want to say anything that would impact King of the Hill's continuity, but I wanted to stay true to the show. Out of respect for Mike Judge, I avoided discussing other King of the Hill characters outside of what was already the designated storyline, and I also made it a conscious decision to avoid politics or anything else that the show had not already established. That's why I never talk about sensitive issues. I was just a cosplayer, impersonating a character I deeply admired. My goal was not to reinvent Hank Hill. It was to pay tribute to Mike Judge by showcasing my impression and ability as a writer and an actor. I knew that whatever I did would be ship and not canon, but I wanted to create something so close that it could be considered ship, and that it would impress Mike Judge. After brainstorming what I was going to do, I came up with the idea that Hank was secretly being recorded by Dale, and that Dale was secretly posting Hank's rants about modern-day culture on the internet. That's why I never looked at the camera at first. My first topics were social media challenges and Unreal Meat, because I thought that they were relevant enough, and something that Hank would have something to say about. The next day, I went to my folks' house, had my son record me on my phone as I stood in front of a wooden fence in the backyard of my folks' house, holding a can of ginger ale as a prop, and I didn't even bother combing my hair. Yep, I was not trying to make a grand statement. I did not even have a clear goal. I simply wanted to see what would happen if I did it. Well, that is Behind the Propane Man, Part 1. Now y'all know why I do this and how I started out. Well, that's all I have for you for now. I wish I could talk a bit more right now, but the WWE SummerSlam is starting. Now, I promise I'll do more of this just chatting here for y'all. And maybe next time I won't be stumbling over my words, because I won't be reading from what is Dan America's blog. But anyway, I just wanted to get my story out there before the premiere of the new seasons of King of the Hill, coming out on August 4th. See, been talking for too long here. Gotta have a sip of water. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm crouching like this too. This is the first time I've done the first chatting, and I think I have the camera set up well. I checked my systems, and my system seemed, well, all right. If I go up this high, you can't see the top of my head. Maybe I should do that more often. That way you can't see how messy my dang hair is. Well, anyway, this was the first Just Chatting from Propane Man Dan America on the Twitch. Yep, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn it into an audio file so that people can enjoy it on the Spotify. Yep, you'll probably see clips and the full video on other social medias, but yep, just like I said, wanted to get the story out there before August 4th, and, well, wanted to start just chatting. But this is Propane Man from Propane Man Dan America, dropping my water and saying, have a good evening. I tell you what,